Hello, everyone. Justin here from the Hang Fire Podcast, and I'm back today with another chat. Today, I'm joined by author Rob Chapman. Rob is a certified Stones superfan who has hung out countless times with the band and also is the author of the book, New Barbarians, Outlaws, Gunslingers, and Guitars, a fantastic book chronicling the history of the New Barbarians band, Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards' side project during the summer of 1979. It's an awesome book that really is the go-to book about this rocking, short-lived band, and very much looking forward to hearing about this and many other things as we talk to Rob Chapman. Welcome, Rob. How are you?
Justin, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, my pleasure that you're here. I'm very excited as well. So much to talk about. Like I mentioned, the book up top. Can't wait to get into those details. Before we do, I think everyone would love to hear your first beginnings with the Rolling Stones. You remember the first time you ever heard the Rolling Stones?
I mean, my brother. I had brothers and sisters that were older. My brothers are 13 years older than me, and my parents had the big stereo cabinet, and they had Beach Boy records, Stones records, Beatles records.
Nice.
So I was introduced to that stuff. My sister she was a little bit, not quite that old. She had Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Elton John. So my first inkling to the Stones was seeing their records, and then I remember looking at Rolling Stones Now and Out of Our Heads going,
wow,
these guys are bad. And I was a little kid thinking they look different for some reason than the Beach Boys or whatever else was. So, yeah, I think because of my older siblings, I got drawn to them like early on out of just falling into it.
Beginnings of this story really started with your very long, illustrious career in the music business, wasn't it? You were working for some pretty big labels.
Yeah, I mean, I started working for labels. I'm 62. I started working for labels in my 30s, and I worked for MCA, Sanctuary, Artemis Records, Universal, and it was what I really liked. I mean, I liked promoting bands. I worked on the marketing side or the sales side, and the Stones when I was there, were either on Virgin or they were on, God, who were they on besides Virgin? I mean, they were on a couple different labels, but they were always they were a band on another label. I would be working with Live or Mary J. Blige or Lyle Lovett, and they were on Virgin. And I'm thinking yeah, did those guys get to work a Stones album? Damn, that's cool. And so, yeah, I mean, I worked for labels for a long time, and so I was always entrenched in the music business.
And that really sets the stage for the door opening for your first interaction with someone from the Rolling Stones, wasn't it? I guess you were working at the time with some items from Chess Records that a certain someone was very interested in.
Yeah, that's a good segue. MCA owned Chess Records at the time. This would have been 97, and they were planning this launch of Chess Records' 50th anniversary, 47 to 97. And they remastered Howlin' Wolf, Willie Dixon, Little
Very cool.
Walter. Yeah, it was big deal. And I was in Minneapolis, and obviously Chess is in Chicago. And they, the head of sales called me and goes, "You're going to have to shepherd this thing like you really are going to be bummed about," because they knew I was a big Stones. And I go, "I am all in." And they go, "We know you'll handle it." So at the time, I was a Midwest regional director of MCA Records. And so this just landed in my lap. And so we basically 2120 Michigan Avenue, which was a Stone song, they relaunched Chess Records in 97. They had guys come in and people come in that relaunched the whole studio and made it look like circa 1947.
Wow.
And so that was I was there for 2 days, and they had a big party, and they invited press and radio stations and retail. And I have a photo somewhere. And so Marshall Chess showed up, Phil Chess showed up, his uncle, Willie Dixon's widow, who I looked at her and I was like, she didn't look that old. And somebody goes, "Yeah, he was with her when she was 17. I go, "Okay."
That sounds about right.
Yeah, those guys. And so it was just this wonderful, launch of this, Chess being, propped up again back in 97.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah, so I'd imagine people started to hear about these collections going out, and it seems. And then you met someone. Was it someone you met? Someone in Boston who understood what you were working on and said, "Oh, I'm going to need a couple copies of a few of those CDs."
Yeah, it was a guy. His name is Fletcher. I never got his last name. His job was if they wanted an amp or a microphone to look like 1940s, he would build it. It didn't work, but it looked exactly like that era. And he was like this mad scientist. He was always working. And when the night was kind of over, we stepped outside. I didn't smoke. He smoked cigarettes, and he went out and he was lit up, and I'm having a beer. And he said, "Hey, do you think can you give me a couple of those chess promos?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem. Yeah, here's my card." And left it at that. And I flew back to Minneapolis probably a day later. I'm sitting in my office, phone rings, 312 area code, which is Chicago. Hey, it's Fletcher. Yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you want some promos? What are we talking here? Oh, I'm thinking like, how many did you put out? We put out like 45 on each, like 45 CDs. I'm thinking I could hear him thinking 180. I took it off speakerphone. I go 180. I go, seriously? And he goes, hold on. He goes, they're for a band. And I said, okay. And he goes, they're for a band named the Rolling Stones. He was trying to be sorry. And I said, oh, come. And you hear that all the time. I know Keith. I know Paul McCartney out. And I said, so, and he goes, they're in Los Angeles cutting an album that's going to be called Bridges to Babylon. And they would love to have a copy, every copy. And I said, I didn't know what to say, but I knew what I wanted to say was absolutely. And so I, said, let me see what I could do. Hung up the phone, talked to my boss, told him the story. He goes, let's do it. So I got this massive box, filled, and I'm putting stuff in. Hendrix just released a bunch of stuff. So we had Hendrix t-shirts.
Yeah, cool.
I'm putting everything I could in there, and I'm sealing the box, going to send it to Los Angeles.
Damn.
And I'm thinking, God, I set the Stones CDs. This is so cool. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, I was beyond myself. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever done. So I send him that. I don't remember the month. He gets it. Don't hear from. Nobody's texting back then. And he called me and he said, hey, we got the CDs. Thank you so much. Oh, no problem. They like them. Of course they liked it. But I got another favor. And I'm like, geez, this guy, man.
Fletcher.
And he goes, well, when they were sitting in the room, Ronnie got a set. Keith got a set. Charlie got a set. And he goes, they were going to spread out the others to everybody else. Mick walked in the room and he goes, what do you guys got? And so we had to give Mick a set. And they said it like begrudgingly. Well, what do you mean? He goes, well, he wasn't involved in the first cut. And I'm like, that is so funny. So I said, so Mick's getting a set. So I sent another one. They sent it. I sent to the mail guy, said, blah, blah, blah. So they got the rest of them. And that was where I thought, man, I could tell my kids I sent Stones to see.
Yeah, the story could kind of end there and you'd be pretty happy, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love the idea that even in 1997 they were in their 50s or so and they're still squabbling over CDs and music.
And I thought that hard to believe too. I'm like listening to them and I'm like, I would hang up the phone and I go, really? Okay.
Well, it sounds like Keith was extremely appreciative of the set and all the music that he got from you. So apparently then he put out word that he wanted to thank you in person.
Yeah, no, that made me endeared to him even more as far as a person. Rob Chapman was one of Keith's right-hand, engineers, mixer, very famous producer who's worked on the band and Dylan, and he's like lived in Weston where Keith lived. And they gave him, he got my number. He called me and said, hey, we're in Columbus, Ohio. I'm mixing the show. Keith is just, thank you for doing that. Can you come to Columbus? Coincidentally, I was in Detroit working, and I had the weekend off. I was single at the time. I said, yeah, I can get down there. I'll get a rental car. I'm there. So I went down to Columbus, got there. Rob's at the mixing board. I got in. He left me a pair of tickets. I went in, met him, hugged him, and he said, Keith's not going to be able to come back and say hi. They're going to fly out right away. He said, thank you so much, but we'll do it another time. And I'm thinking, I got free tickets to the Columbus show. I'm already in heaven. Saw the show, and that's where it ended. And so, blah, 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 it goes on. All of a sudden, fast forward a month, I live in Minneapolis, obviously. I get a call. I'm looking at my phone, and I'm like, I don't recognize that number. I pick it up. It's Keith's right-hand guy who's been with him forever, Tony Russell. And he talks fast, and he has a little stutter. And he goes, "Hey, Tony Russell, Keith wants to thank you for the seat. Wants you to come to the show. Do you got tickets for the show?" And I said, "I do." And he goes, "Well, I got better seats." He goes, "There'll be tickets, and we'll call for you. Backstage pass. Come out to Keith. I got to go." He hung up. I was like, wow.
What a character.
So, character and just moving fast. It was handling Keith on a tour. It's got to be hard.
Yeah. Right.
And so I went down to, it was at the Metrodome in Minneapolis. I went down to the show, and sure enough, I had 2 tickets, 2 backstage passes. And I'm going to the show. It's courtesy of Keith.
Wow, that's amazing. And this is what, 1997, 98?
7. Yep.
Yeah.
November 97.
I love that tour, by the way. That was when I entered into the Stones fandom myself, was around that tour.
Yeah.
But could you describe, because very few of us have been backstage at any show, forget a Rolling Stones show. And you've probably been backstage many times up to that point already. But was there anything different or more significant about the environment or the activity around in the backstage area of a Stones show?
Well, you hit it on the head. Since I was in the music business, doing backstages, meet and greets, part of your job. I had worked with a lot of artists, Hole, Nirvana. I had met. So I mean, I was accustomed to how it works, what not to do, what to do. But this was the Yankees. This was up here,
right?
And so I got there, got the passes. And I'm in the bowels of this big Metrodome, and I've got the Bridges to Babylon pass, and there's some big guy. He's like, "Go." Next guy,
nice.
Go. There's different levels. Finally, I get to the next level, into this room, and I look over, and It's a Wonderful Life is playing on a big screen. And I'm talking to myself. I'm with my girlfriend, but I'm talking to myself going, that's Charlie Watts. And he's wrestling like this, and it's Ronnie Wood's kids. And then I look over and I go, that's Bernard Fowler. That's Bobby Keys. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the belly of the beast.
Holy God.
And I'm just sitting back there, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. I had done these a zillion times, but not with these guys.
Right.
And I'm just sitting back there, and I'm sitting there, and Tony always said to me, I go, how will I know? He goes, I'll find you. So I'm sitting back there, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go get a beer. I went and got a beer. And I had a box of 30 CDs of a bunch of stuff, but I had Impulse Jazz CDs that have an orange spine. And I saw Charlie, he caught the eye he knew what it was. And he walked over and he goes, who are you? And I said, I'm Rob. I'm friends with Keith. I'm his guest. I didn't know what to say. And he goes, oh, sorry to hear that you're friends with Keith. And he we sit down, and he's looking at Ornette Coleman and Thelonious. I go, I brought these for you. I know you like jazz, obviously. He goes, these are mine. I go, yeah. And he's opening them up, and then he's in school. He's like, yeah, they wanted Miles for that one, but they settled for Coltrane, and that. And he's talking, and I'm like going, every now and then I'd look away and I go, is this fucking happening?
You caught Charlie Watts geeking out over jazz.
Geeking out. And he was just going over this. He's schooling me. And while this is going on, I'm starting to settle down. I'm starting to relax. And I'm kind of looking around, and I see these guys over there with golf shirts, and they've got Sprint on their shirts.
Wow.
And obviously Sprint was one of the sponsors. And so they were waiting for their moment to meet the Stones, is what I'm gathering here. What we used to call a cattle call, and I'm thinking, I've always heard that you got to know when to leave. And I'm thinking, okay, he's got his CDs. I'm going to get up and go get a sandwich till people come for me. And I do one of these, and he tugs on me and he goes, "Where are you going?" I go, "Well, I don't know. I'm going to," he goes, "Can you do me a favor? Can you stay here and talk to me for a few minutes?" I said, "Yeah." And I realized right then he did not want to talk to, not that he didn't like the sprint guys, but he's no good at, Charlie doesn't like that stuff. And so I said, "Absolutely." And so I was basically doing a block so he didn't have to schmooze. And he did that for like another 7 or 8 minutes. And we talked about it. And he had a genuine look in his eye, like he was enjoying himself. And I was like, this is so weird. And then go ahead.
That just sums up Charlie in every way, isn't it? Just, stay here, protect me from the corporate guys.
The corporate guys,
that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is going great. And all of a sudden there's a guy, he's doing this, "Rob?" And I said, I grabbed my girl, we walk back, and he takes me back down a hallway, down another hallway, X-ray lounge, whatever it said. And he basically shoves me in and he goes, "You got 30 minutes. And
my God.
Keith is laying on a couch and he's not passed out. He's just laying down. And on the table in front of him is the set list, pack of Marlboros, a bag of weed, and his knife, his famous knife.
Handy dandy knife.
And I walked in and hi, he goes, "Oh, you made it," blah, blah, blah. Very, very made you feel right at home right away.
That's cool.
Sit down. He goes, "Sit down." And, he's lacing up his boots and we're talking. And I just sat there for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We made a drink and we talked about, everything from, they just came from Vegas. "I like it better when the mafia ran the place." To dogs. He's a big dog guy. And we were talking about like, "What do you have?" And I said, "I have a lab." And he goes, "Great." So, I'm all of a sudden it's all gone. I'm relaxed because he's a guy, he's a dude, right. And he's just talking to me. And,
is there any music playing in the dressing room?
Yeah, he was playing, it was probably like a world. It wasn't reggae. It was like this world kind of thing, very instrumental, and it was very calming.
What was the vibe in his dressing room? Is there specific lighting? I would imagine it'd be very kind of low key.
What do you think he had on the lamp?
Oh yeah, it's got to have some scarf.
Yeah, scarves. He had the scarves, and he's just it was very like, just a couch, a table, and it was just like, and I'm more sitting there going. And I'm looking at my girlfriend going, and she knows what I'm thinking. Is this freaking happening? And, I'm just sitting there. And so it goes well. And I'm thinking, oh, I know what I said to him. I go, "So what do you think of the opening band, Matchbox 20? He goes, "I don't even know who they are." And they had sold like 2 million records at this point.
Yeah, they're pretty big.
They were big. And so it was like, okay, he's locked into the Stones world. I get it. Yeah. And it ended, and all of a sudden I stood up and I hear somebody go, "Keith, go to get your wardrobe." And he stands up. He goes, "Well, I got to go be showbiz." And I go, "I got to ask you, Keith, can I get a photo?" And he goes, "Absolutely." He goes, "I need a picture taken." And all of a sudden this girl comes around the corner. There's a curtain there, and she comes around. "Oh, shut up. It's Joe Wood."
Ronnie's
wife at the time. Yeah. Right. And she comes around. Hello. Very sweet woman. Took 2 photos, and he goes, "Gotta go." He goes, "Nice meeting you, pal." And I went my way. He went his way.
It's a family affair. Joe Wood taking a picture of Keith and
belittling Keith.
That's fantastic. Wow. I mean, that's a pretty good interaction with 2 guys that, like you said, this is the Yankees, and they couldn't have been more like guys at a bar. It seems like
made me more endeared to them, because I have met people that are successful musicians and they were jagoffs. I mean, right. They were just not guys. That's fine. That's their world. But the fact that they were that big and that down to earth, that you and I could just talk to them about, day-to-day stuff, it was really refreshing.
I love that interaction with Charlie. I'd imagine every interaction anyone's ever had with Charlie is somewhat like that, where it's just him being so humble and approachable, and so cool. How did you interact with Ronnie? When did that come in?
I did meet him that night. So that was 97. They did the No Security tour in 99. So they came back through to Minneapolis, and by that, Tony Russell he said he knew that Keith kind of okayed me. Like, there's people that are annoying. I obviously got in the group where, not only did I bring them gifts, but I wasn't annoying. And so Tony probably put that in his little book. And he gave me his number. And I said, can I come back and say hi to the guy? I didn't ask for tickets. I said, can I go back and see him? Security, they're playing at the Target Center in Minneapolis. I said, absolutely. I'll leave him at the door. So I came back and I went backstage that night. This is an interesting night. So I went back and there was one person of note that was sitting backstage at a table, Jesse Ventura, Jesse the Body. And he used to be he did some bodyguard stuff for the Stones on the Some Girls tour.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Okay, cool.
So he was back. He wasn't our governor yet. And he was back there, and I looked over. We're waiting, for Keith to come out. Keith and Ronnie are over there playing snooker. And I look over at Jagger's playing they have pinball and video game. He's playing with one of his kids, one of his sons, young. And I brought a friend back with me who was nervous as all get out. He's got pictures laid out on this table. He wants this side. And Mick came only time I've met Mick once, and it was that time. Mick walked by, did one of these. What you got there? And I said, he goes, who are you here? I said, well, I know Rob Chapman. And Keith goes, oh, say hi to Rob. And he goes, hello. And he walked by and he took his son with him. And that story about Mick wanting to know who everybody is, that was that. He wanted to know who was in the room.
Wow.
And so then I sat there, and then Keith and Ronnie came back. Tony grabbed me. We went in there around the corner, and there was a round table. Ronnie here, Keith there, and they're riffing off each other. They got candles going. And I said, hey, and how you doing, Keith? He goes, good. You know Ronnie? And Ronnie goes, I never forget how he said it. He goes, hey, man, you got any more of those chest tasties? He called them chest tasties.
Sure.
And I go, yeah, I'll see what I can do, And he's like, have a good show. And they're locked into, they're playing acoustically off each other. So that was my first meeting of actually saying hi to Ronnie. And he acknowledged, Keith probably said, that's the chess guy.
Who brings the chest tasties.
Tasties, yes.
I love the picture you're painting here because I think a lot of people like to think that a band like the Rolling Stones, who have done this for so long, that the backstage or just the idea of them touring is very cold and clinical, and it's very, time card punch in, punch out. But it sounds to me that, they're hanging out backstage. It's not just like, oh, we'll see you on stage. It seems like it's a very like a picnic, festival or something back there with all of them hanging out.
Yeah, and they seem like they seem like a family.
Right.
They seem like, there's Joe and there's the kids and there's Charlie and Charlie's, they're all, people think that, this, but, Marlon was on the road with the Stones in 1969. They always have family with them. There's no doubt they had their debauchery moments, but they've always had family around them.
I love that. I've heard Keith label it as like a family of gypsies. They all just travel as a clan together, as a group, which I love that imagery.
Rob Chapman called me. This would have been 2000. So they're not on the road.
That's good.
And Rob called me. He goes, you want to really score some points? And I said, what do I got to do? And he said, Keith he mentioned to me that he wants this Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, not Sebastian Bach out of Skid Row, but the classical Bach. He wants this box set that just came out through Polygram. And I said, well, you want me to get that? He goes, get that, and he'll be happy.
It's a huge box set.
Well, yeah, that was the funny thing about it. So I actually had a friend who was one of the assistants at Polygram Classics. I call her up. I go, hey, Than, I got a favor to ask. If I can do it, I'll do it, Rob. I need a classical promo. And she goes, which one? And I go, Bach just came out with a new box set. Long pause. That's like 15 discs. And I go, it is? She goes, yeah, it's like this carton. It's in a crate. I go, here's the deal. Luckily, her husband was a big Keith fan. And I said, Keith asked me for it. She goes, yeah, Rob told me you met him, so I know it's legit. Let me see what I could do. Day later, emails me, you're in, mailed it to me, and I had it, and I said to Rob, I said, where do you want me? Just send it to me and I'll give it to him. And I believed him. So I sent the box set, sent it to him. He got it. So I'm in New York on business, just coincidentally. And Rob said, there's a Neville and family show at the Hammerstein that I'm going to mix the sound. Keith is going to go. He might get on stage. And he goes, I'll leave you past. You should go to that. It'll be easy to hang out and just go. So I had a free night. I went, got there. The Nevilles are on stage. And I could see Keith and Jane Rose sitting up there. They were sitting up there because he told me where they probably were. So there was an intermission in this show. And he said, meet me by the front of the stage. I went down there and Rob grabbed me and went back. And there was Keith, Patty, and Jane Rose sitting on a table. Keith was smoking a joint. And he goes, hey. I mean, the fact that he knew me, I was like, this is so weird. Hey, and he goes, you made it. And he indulged and took a couple of hits with him. And we're talking. And Patty does one of these. Come here a minute. And I had never met her. She goes, nice to meet you. I know who you are. She goes, can I talk to you something? She goes, thanks a lot. And I go, what? She goes, that's all he fucking plays is that box set. We can't even talk some nights. It's on all the time. And I look over at Keith's over there. It was like you're hanging out with your younger brother or something. It was weird. So that was the box set that he just supposedly wore out.
That's a great problem to have is you've given something that Keith loves too much, that's now affecting his day-to-day with his wife at home. I love that.
And it's classical music. It's not like he's playing AC/DC. It's this, so yeah, it was very funny.
That's great. Well, yeah, and it's sort of inevitable that you kind of brought things to another new level, because we're going to flash forward a little bit with this book that you came out with in 2016, which I understand will be reissued. But it's a book about the new Barbarians, which I'm so glad that you put together. And this book really is fantastic. I was reading it, and it is incredibly detailed and finally puts together this sort of forgotten chapter in the Stones' history that very few people know about. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the genesis of this band. What is the new Barbarians?
Well, the new Barbarians I think they even say that it was a collision of two worlds. I mean, Keith got busted in 77. He awaited trial till 78. He, we all know, not everybody, but we know the story of the trial. He got off, had to do a year of probation, pay a fine, and the Stones had to do 2 free shows for benefit of choice. And they chose the Canadian National Institute of the Blind, CNIB, and they had to do that in the spring of 79 because the trial was the fall of 78. Well, why that's going on, and they had already cut Some Girls, and Some Girls sessions are going on. Ronnie has a quick window where he says, I can do a solo album right now. And he went in the studio real close to the same time Some Girls was in the studio. And he did the album, which became Gimme Some Neck. And he does that album. Keith's over. Keith doesn't have to go hard time. Comes into the spring of 79. The 2 shows are set for Oshawa, Canada, April 21st of 79. And so that's already set in stone. They didn't tour in 79. They should have been in Europe for 79 to promote Some Girls. Mick was going through divorce from Bianca. They just chose not to. Keith's bust was, a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So the summer of 79 was wide open. So Ronnie says, I'm going to do what every other person. I'm going to promote my record. I'm going to put a band together and do a tour. Wow. So he gets Stanley Clark. Stanley Clark always commented, which is weird, that Ronnie's bass playing with the Jeff Beck group really influenced him.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so Ronnie called Stanley, asked him, do you know any Chuck Berry songs? Stanley's like, yeah, I know Chuck Berry songs. He gets the 2 people that make the most sense. Ian McLagan on keyboards, Bobby Keys on sax. Charlie was He was ready to go, but then he wanted to do this side project, Rocket 88, with Jack Bruce and Ian Stewart, so he bowed out. But Charlie did say before leaving, get Zigaboo, Joseph from the Meters. And the Stones were very familiar with the Meters, toured with them in 75, 78. So they were familiar with the Meters. So Ronnie said, perfect. So he went and got Joseph Zigaboo Modaliste from the Meters. And then he's thinking about another guitar player. Jeff Beck comes in, Jimmy Page comes in, Boz Scaggs, Neil Young. There's all these people, and just none of it really materialized. And then all of a sudden, enter Keith, and he's like, I got nothing to do this, I'll do it. And of course, it made total sense. And so Keith swoops in, and so there you got the band that's going to tour behind Gimme Some Neck, 17 shows, and where it all started was they do the two. So there was April 22nd is the date, Oshawa, Canada. They do New Barbarians, do the late morning show, Rolling Stones, New Barbarians, Rolling Stones. 4 shows in one day for Keith, Woody, Mac, and Bobby. That that's crazy.
Yeah.
So they do these killer shows. They called them the Blind Date. John Belushi was the MC. And that was fulfilling Keith's sentencing. Ronnie kicks off the tour there, and there were 17 more dates starting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that took them till middle of June in the summer of 79.
Wow. I mean, this is really the super group of super groups, isn't it? This collection.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And yeah, I mean, how many shows within the tour? 17, 18?
They did 17 in the States, and then that ended in June, and then they went to Nebworth in August of 79.
First of all, fantastic, gorgeous pictures throughout the book. It really is this time travel to go back to this era and really live this band. And I was happy to find out that the New Barbarians played arenas. They played large venues. They weren't just playing theaters or small clubs. They were playing some pretty big spaces, were they?
Yeah, and that was kind of, I mean, the Stones just came off the Some Girls tour. They were the hottest hot. They were selling out shows. Their record sold millions of copies. Miss You was all over the radio. Beast of Burden. Mac was in the tour. Bobby was always right there, but Mac actually played on Miss You. So they were hot as can be, but they went out as the New Barbarians and Friends. So Ronnie had a manager named Jason Cooper, who was a football meaning soccer. He was a promoter of big proportions. Yeah. And so he would just New Barbarians and Friends. So, why would it be weird for Mick to get up and sing in one New York show? Why would Rod not do one song? So it was, every show was Van Morrison's going to be there. Bob Dylan's going to be there. It went on and on and on. And, the shows were very chaotic because you can get a lot of bootlegs on the Barbarians, but Ronnie's, leaning over and people are saying, where's Mick? Where's Rod? And Ronnie even said in one of the live shows, he's like, these are the boys that are going to be playing with me if these boys ain't special enough. Like, he couldn't believe, how cool do you want it? I got Keith here. I got Stanley Clarke here. What do you want?
Yeah, really.
It was very weird.
Wow, absolutely. That must have been a hell of a thing for people to go see. I mean, it's like an alternate Stones universe or something, to see this band. Which, is it true that Neil Young named the band?
Yes, absolutely. He wanted desperately to go on the road with these guys. It would have, he had never met Keith before at this point. Neil Young is big at this time, obviously.
Sure.
And he had never met Keith. And as the story goes, they were rehearsing in Santa Monica. And in Stones time, as you know, takes sometimes a long time. And Neil Young got sick of waiting, and he said, I got to go do my thing. He wanted to go promote Rust Never Sleeps, the movie, is what he wanted to go promote. He had to go promote. And so when his parting shot supposedly was, I got to go. You guys are just a bunch of barbarians. And Ronnie's like, I like that.
Noted. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, as the tour is progressing and they're playing these large arenas, and the billing is still out there, like you mentioned, the New Barbarians and Friends, and there's all this talk that perhaps these special guests might be coming in, and it seems like audiences were expecting that and not getting them. And there were a couple rough spots in the tour, weren't there? Where there were actual some violence and some unexpected things happened because of people's expectations that apparently weren't met.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think Stanley Clark in the book, when I would talk to him off the tour, he's a jazz guy.
Yeah.
And Stanley said, yeah, there's a lot of testosterone on that tour.
I love that quote. I saw that in the book. I said, oh, that's what I'm hearing when he listened to those shows.
Yeah. I mean, it was alpha, alpha, alpha. These guys were just they were just rugged. And so there was a lot of shows where they, it was a predominantly male audience. But when they went to Milwaukee, there was, Wisconsin, as we know, like their brandy, and that, it's a drinking state. Well, the fact that there was no guests and the fact that they only played for an hour and 10 minutes just escalated into this full-on riot. And when I talked to guys like Ken Graham, who designed the stage, and the mixing guys at the mixing board, they were putting up, tables and stuff. They said the best way to describe it was an old Frankenstein movie from the 30s where the villagers were coming down the street with pitchforks saying, "We want the monster." It was out of hand, and it didn't stop. And it was, it was stuff being thrown, and it was a full-on riot in this arena in Milwaukee.
And Keith and Ronnie and the rest of the band, they were gone by that point of the night.
They got out. Yeah, the show ended, and they would always get out, but the fans it all just came to a crescendo. That short show, no special guests, alcohol, it just blew up.
How did the book come about? The book, New Barbarians, Outlaws, Gunslingers, and Guitars. That's a fantastic book. How did this come about for you?
At this point, so you fast forward to like 2014, at this point, I'd been to Keith's house. I've been backstage many times. I've got to know Ronnie. I mean, it sounds really corny, but yeah, I considered them friends.
Sure.
And I was at home one night. I just got a Cincinnati live bootleg of the New Barbarian, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, damn. I said, that period was, I love that period. And I'm thinking, Ronnie was a big emailer at the time. He was 6 hours ahead of me, so it's probably like 11 my time, 4 or 5 his time. And, he's up just doing whatever. And I said to him, I go, why didn't anybody do more with the New Barbarians, like a book or a tour pro? And he's like, he didn't really say anything. And then I said, I'm listening to the bootleg Cincinnati. I go, we need to punch it up, but it sounds great. And the next email I got from him, he goes, why don't you write a book? And I thought he was just being Ronnie. And I said, I think I did, ha ha. And that's where it ended. I think we all went to bed or whatever. The next day, he was with his manager at the time was Charlie's manager too, Sherry Daly, who was with him since Emotional Rescue, who retired just a couple years ago. She sends me an email, and Ronnie's on copy, and she's like, I had talked to her on the phone. She's got that very heavy. So Ronnie says, you're going to write a book. And I'm like, I am. And I'm like, you got it. And I'm like, what do you say? You don't say no. And I said, that was it. I was off and running. The weird thing is that at the time, I had just taken on a job. The music business had kind of splintered. I had my last days in the music industry, and I took a job running a indie music book department at a publishing company. And I'm sitting at a publishing company, and I'm like, I'm going to write a book. So I went and met with one of the guys down the hall, and I go, look, Ronnie will do the foreword. I'll give you a marketing plan about the Stones. I know about the New Barbarians. Can we make this work? He goes, absolutely. And so he took me under his wing, and I said, I've never done a book. You got to help me here. He goes, we're off and running. So we put it all together, and we sent it down every other Thursday at this company called Quarto. They would do a review of all the books that they wanted to submit, submissions. And I gave them, I had a marketing plan. We'll put a CD in the back of the book. Ronnie Wood will do the foreword, which he agreed to at the time. And I'm sitting in my cubicle working, and I see the guy come out. He sticks his head out and he goes, and I go, son of a, we're off and running. So, I mean, that was how it started. I was kind of lost because, like, what do I do now? So that's where it started. That was 2014.
What was the most difficult thing about putting this book together?
Getting them to, them meaning all the people involved, to give me timely answers, and them not. Well, a perfect example would be, now this, I'm being hypothetical. Well, Frank said that he was the guy who, you know, the bathroom door where you put the sign up with that, and then Ronnie would say, no, Frank wasn't even there that night. And then I go, okay. And then Stanley Clark would say, God, that Madison Square Garden was, are you sure Mick didn't play in that Madison Square? I go, he didn't play on any of the shows. God, I could have sworn he was there. And then sending that to Ronnie, Ronnie goes, what the hell is Stanley on that night? And I'm like, I'm trying to corral all this stuff. So, I mean, I think it was, not only was it a while ago for them, but it was getting the story straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I, you know, I'll tell you what, I never wanted that book to come out where none of it was factual. I didn't want to have hearsay. You read a book about something you're in love with, and you go, that's not 75, that's 71. Drives me crazy. And so I wanted to nail it.
Well, you did, because I have to say, as I was looking through the book, you felt that kind of safety that you would feel when you read these kind of books, where you go, oh, this guy's done the work, and you feel like you can, your hands being held as you're going through the whole story, and it's a very nice journey. And it comes with a CD performance of one of the new Barbarians shows, right?
Live from Madison Square Garden is the CD in the back. It's been cleaned up by Rob Chapman. It was a bootleg at one time, but he punched up the bass and they made it sound really good. And I released some vinyl I don't have it in front of me, some vinyl that went with the book that Ronnie gave me a quote, said something like, these are all sounding very nice. So he even liked the way it sounded. And so the whole project was just, you know, I couldn't have asked for more. And just made me really instill how great of guys they were. But if I've got 5 more minutes, I got to tell you something about it. So the vinyl, which you can find on Amazon, I put inside I said it was dedicated to Bobby and Mac. So I can't remember it would have been December 4th. Don't quote me, 2014. I get an email from Ronnie, and Bobby Keys had been in the hospital for a long time. He was not doing well. The band knew that. He didn't tour with them last time. And Ronnie emailed me because he knew I was writing a book. And he said, we lost a Barbarian.
Yes.
And I knew what he meant. And I'm like, oh, so sorry. He goes, blah, 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 whatever he said, and moved on. That was on a Monday. 2 days later, I got another email from him, said, we've lost another Barbarian. And I stepped back and I'm like, he already told me this, but I don't want to offend him. So I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah, Mac just died. And so Mac and Bobby died within the same week. And what was really ironic about Ian McLagan dying was he fell in his shower. His driver it wasn't a limo, town car driver, picked him up all the time. He said, Ian McLagan was very prompt, came to the door, knocked. Mac knew when his pickup time was, didn't answer the door, did one of those. He had fell in the shower. And then that's how, you know, he brain. But the thing about that was he was showering because he was going to go fly to Minneapolis to go on the road with Nick Lowe. And that was the first show in Minneapolis. And I had arranged to interview him for the book. So I thought that was really weird that he was coming to Minneapolis and that's how he died. And so that's why I dedicated the album to Mac and Bobby.
Well, it goes to show that what makes this book even more important is that it's a historical document that captures, you know, everyone's memories of this very short-lived period. That I think that sums it up as, you know, this was something that saved Keith. I think people don't realize that it was not just this, you know, random thing that they put together, you know, just for shits and giggles, which it kind of was, but underneath all those layers was a very important reason. And if Keith, who knows what could have happened had that tour not gone through. So I think we should, frame it in that way. People should really look out for this part of the story. It's a very cool part of the story. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. Really had a lot of good times here. Very
Justin,
fun.
I love it. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.